Well, hello, this is Vincent Green, and we're going to continue our look at New Testament Greek grammar. We're using this textbook that was written back in the 1920s, but it still works today. It's still functional for today, or still useful as a tool to help you learn Greek grammar. And today we're looking at lesson number 4. Lesson number 4, and this will definitely be at least 2 videos. It could go into a third, but most likely at least 2 videos. We'll see how far we get in each one. But today we're going to begin looking at nouns. Nouns. Now, everybody speaks. Everybody speaks language, but not everybody is aware of grammar and even the grammar of their own language. Like I speak English, and so even though I normally speak English, that's the language I grew up hearing and I speak it, I may not understand the grammar of how English language is put together. And normally you learn grammar in like elementary school and middle school, high school. You learn grammar in those years. And but not everybody really understands how language is put together. They speak it, but they don't understand all the nuances of it in terms of the framework, the structure. So when you're learning another language, a language that you have never learned before, you have to deal with the grammar, and you have to deal with the grammar structure of language. And that's not easy, especially if you're not aware of it. So in the previous lesson, lesson 3, we talked about verbs. And I came across the site that I'm going to start using when it's helpful. And it's a group called Grammarly, and they have some free tools that are online. And this one is they have a like an article here about verbs, the definitive guide. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this link available in the previous videos, the videos of lesson 3. So I'll make this link available in that back in those the YouTube description of those videos for lesson 3. There was a couple of videos I think for lesson 3, and I'll put this in here so you can go back and look at this. But if you go through here, what is a verb? Types of verbs, verb categories, and it gives you the basic understanding of what a verb is. So what is a verb? Verbs are words that describe actions, whether physical or mental. Verbs also describe a state of being, which there's a certain Greek word that we'll eventually learn that's regarding this state of being. And these verbs translate into the idea of be, become, or exist. I am. So I am the state. That's the state of being verb. Or Salah ran across the field, kicked the ball, scored a goal. So this is performing a physical action. And so, or I don't feel so good. There's a mental action there. So these are good articles. I think that if you went through these, they would help in understanding the basics of the grammatical categories that we're talking about in the Greek language. This is the one that I wanted to show you for today's lesson, for this lesson, lesson 4, because this one's about nouns. And so it's a guide to everything that's a noun. So like a noun is a word that names something, such as a person, a place, a thing, or idea. In a sentence, nouns can play the role of being the subject of the sentence, the direct object of the sentence, the indirect object of the sentence, a complement, subject complement, object complement. They can be in a positive, they can be a modifier, you can have proper nouns, singular nouns, plural nouns, possessive nouns, concrete nouns. There's all kinds of aspects to learning about nouns. And so as we work through Greek, each of the lessons, we're going to be talking about verbs, we're going to be talking about nouns, different aspects of nouns. There's other things that come along, other grammatical categories. And so as we are introduced to those other grammatical categories, then I will have a document from Grammarly that would help us, either Grammarly or some other site, that would give you a basics to understand what these grammatical categories are. Again, to learn language, to learn the Greek language, or really any language for that matter, even the language that you speak, you have to understand it according to its structure. And there's every language has nouns and verbs and what we call adjectives and adverbs. They have all of these grammatical parts of speech, we could say. The difference is that they look differently in different languages. They're formed differently in different languages. And so you have to be aware of all this. And that's why the way you learn Greek grammar is little bit by little bit. You cannot do this in just a few days. It's not going to work because you have to comprehend all of this. You have to really spend some time with this. You need to be spending about 30 minutes to 45 minutes to an hour a day, at least 5 days a week, working with Greek every day. It's something that you have to do a little bit every day to be able to get a hold of it. Just watching these videos is not going to teach you Greek. I'm giving you a framework to follow. I'm walking through all of this with you, but you have to just what we call bite the bullet and do it. So if you click this link that's in the YouTube description, you'll get a full document where it talks about what nouns are. Nouns are words that identify people, places, things, ideas. So they could be concrete things or they could be abstract ideas. As one of the fundamental building blocks of language, and it is, nouns and verbs are fundamental building blocks. They allow us to identify and discuss everything in our world, from tangible objects like a book and a tree to intangible ideas like freedom and happiness. The word freedom is a noun. Happiness is a noun. A book and a tree are nouns. So without nouns, language would lack the essential tools to label and describe the subjects or objects of our sentences. So you could say, names can be a person. It could be Albert Einstein or the president or my mother. Names can name a place, Disneyland, a bedroom, um, or some kind of mountain, Vesuvius. Can name a thing like a shoe, a faucet, an idea, freedom, a tangible ball, basketball. Things, different things. Nouns can function in different ways, but so you can have proper nouns, common nouns, singular nouns, abstract, collective, all these different kinds of nouns. And so then they go and give you examples here of those different kinds of nouns, and proper nouns as opposed to common nouns, singular as opposed to plural, countable nouns as opposed to uncountable nouns. So you have like the word some property or a piece of property. Um, you could have what's called a gerund, which is a verb acting as a noun. A gerund is a verb that ends in ing and functions as a noun in a sentence. Like swimming is fun. He enjoys running. Reading improves your vocabulary. Even though you would say reading is an action, it's functioning as a subject. It's a noun because the verb is the word improves here. So you have to begin to think about understanding the component parts of a sentence. What are the nouns? What are the verbs? What are the other parts of speech? That's what you have to do when you're learning Greek grammar. Actually, this is what you need to do in the Bible when you're actually just studying the Bible and trying to understand what the Bible is saying. You break it down into its sentences, and then you begin to isolate the different parts of speech so that you can put together what's going on. You can begin to assess and what's being said and what's being communicated. So this is what makes learning a language more difficult, more time consuming. So I just want to make you aware of that, especially at the beginning where we're still in the early lessons of Greek grammar, and how it's important to make sure that you're taking the time necessary. If you're not able to take the time necessary, you're not going to learn this. It's just not going to happen. And so it comes with time. It comes with practice. It comes with work. You got to be dedicated to this. It's just how it goes. I'm just being honest with you. So I'm going to put this link and in the YouTube description of this video and all the videos for lesson 4, and so that you can click on this and read through this and get access to it. It's a free little document that you can kind of get exposed to what are nouns. And as we move forward in Greek grammar, as we did with verbs, we introduced the verbs in the last lesson. Well, there's other verbs don't look all the same way. There's other kinds of verbs in Greek grammar. They look differently, and so we're going to eventually get to those. But today we're looking at nouns and beginning the process, because nouns in Greek, you have to. It's one thing to understand what a noun is. It's another thing to understand what does it look like in Greek, and that's part of what I want to deal with um, for you today. So we're going to begin with lesson 4, and this one's called the second declension. There's declension means it's a type of grammatical form. There's the second declension. We're going to learn it first. Yeah, why don't shouldn't we start with the first declension? Well, in terms of learning this and learning the process of recognizing Greek nouns and how they form and how they look, it's easier to talk about the second declension before we talk about the first declension. There's also going to be a third declension later on. So there's 3 different declensions, and so we want to be we're going to get exposed to all of them, but we're going to start with the second declension. Now, remember, in every lesson moving forward, there's always going to be a vocabulary section. I'm going to come back to this and mention this later, but I want to begin the process of introducing us to nouns and what nouns are, and specifically in terms of the Greek grammar. So there are 3 what we call declensions in Greek. The second declension is given before the first one for purposes of convenience, since it is easier and it has a larger number of common nouns in them. So in the Greek grammar system, the second declension is, if you learn the second declension, it's going to be easier to learn the first and the third. That's the point of this. And if we start with the first, it's just better to start with the second one of the three declensions. So in Greek, there is no indefinite article in Greek. So if we say the word adelphos, and adelphos means brother, that's the first word in the vocabulary, which we'll talk about in just a little bit. If we look at the word adelphos, it can mean either brother or a brother. So brother without any article, or even like in English, you have a definite article, the, the, and you have an indefinite article, a, right? So some languages have that, some don't. They'll have a definite article, but they may not have an indefinite article. Well, Greek is that way. There's no expressed indefinite article. That's the point he's saying here. It doesn't have an expressed indefinite article. So when you see the word by itself, you could translate it brother or a brother. Usually the latter is better. Greek has, however, a definite article. And where the Greek article does not appear, the definite article should not be inserted. Thus, adelphos does not mean the brother. So, in plural, when a noun is plural, English, like Greek, has no indefinite article. So here's a different word, anthropoi. Anthropoi is the word for like humanity, mankind, as we will see in the vocabulary. This is the plural form of it. Means simply men. It does not mean the men. If you do not see an article, the definite article attached to the noun, don't translate it with the definite article. Now, we're going to show you what the article looks like, but there's an official word. There's a separate word in Greek for the article, and we'll get to that. Now, the Greek noun has gender, number, and case. Gender is masculine. There's 3 genders: masculine, feminine, and neuter. Now let me read this statement and then I'm going to talk about gender. There are the three genders, masculine, feminine, neuter. The gender of nouns must often be learned by observation of the individual noun. But nearly all nouns of the second declension ending in, if the noun ends with the two letters omicron sigma, that's final sigma, they are masculine. All nouns of the second declension ending in omicron neuter are neuter. Or I'm sorry, omicron new are neuter. The gender is indicated in the vocabulary by the article placed after the noun. The masculine article ha, that's the masculine article, indicates masculine gender. The feminine article hey, there's an eta with a rough breathing. This is an omicron with a rough breathing. That's feminine gender. And the neuter article ta, tau, omicron with a acute accent, neuter gender. So how do you know which gender it is? Now, you would say, okay, masculine, that's nouns referring to boys and, all things manhood. Feminine is all things womanhood. Neuter is in between, neither masculine or feminine. It doesn't actually work out that way. Feminine, like there's a word that you'll learn called ecclesia. That's the word for church. We talk about it as, we translate it by the word church. It's the Greek word ecclesia. Would you think ecclesia is a masculine word, masculine gender, or feminine gender? Now the church is made up of men and women and children, right? But who profess faith in Christ. But the term has a gender to it. The gender has, you got to understand this. Gender in Greek does not, in all cases, refer to the gender like sexuality, okay? So the word ecclesia, even though we use the terms masculine, feminine, and neuter, it's not in relation to sexual identity. It has nothing to do with that. It has everything to do with the nature of the words in terms of how they're formed by the endings. And so the way you learn which gender is connected to that noun, and nouns can only have one gender. They can't have multiples. They're either going to be masculine, feminine, or neuter, not a combination thereof. And so the way you know exactly what gender it is you look at the article that is attached to it in the vocabulary listing. If it's ha, then it's a masculine. If it's eta with the rough breathing, hey, we'll pronounce it that way, it's feminine gender. If it's ta with the accent mark there, that's neuter gender. So, in terms of gender, there's three different genders. And every noun has one of the three. And you just want to memorize which one is which. So, now I can take you to the vocabulary. We have here adelphos, ha, a brother. Anthropos, ha, a man. Apostolos, ha, an apostle. Doulos, ha, a slave, a servant. Notice the first four of these. They're in this format. Here's the word, there's the article. Here's the word, there's the article. Here's the noun, there's the article. So this one is masculine, 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 masculine. Doron is the word for gift. Ta doron, a gift, a gift. So this one's neuter, neuter. Thanatos, ha, is a death. Death. Ta hieron, a temple. Temple. Now, there's a conjunction. I'll talk about that one later, but it's kai. We translate that by the word and. Logos, ha, a word. Ha namas, a law, like the law of God. Ha logos, the word of God. Oikos, ha oikos, a house. So a house like a dwelling. And ha weos, a son. So masculine noun, masculine noun, masculine noun, masculine, neuter, masculine noun, masculine, 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 masculine. 2 neuters in this list, no feminines. There's no feminine nouns in this list. We're going to see feminine nouns in lesson 5. But at this point, we're just being exposed to nouns that are masculine and nouns that are neuter. And how do I know? I know which gender they are by the article that's attached to them in the vocabulary listing. Okay? So I have to memorize all of this. When I am learning my vocabulary, I need to learn adelphos, ha, anthropos, ha, apostolos, ha, doulos, ha, doulos, apostolos, anthropos, adelphos. Remember, the accent mark is where you place the accent, the stress, when you're saying the word. Doron, that tells me it's neuter. Because I learn the article with the vocabulary word, or with the noun. Technically, the vocabulary is article plus noun, article plus noun, article plus noun, article plus noun. That's so you can learn the gender of the word, okay? You can be aware of what is the gender of the word. Now, and why is it important to learn the gender of the word? As you will see, there are things down the road that we will learn in future lessons where nouns need to agree with pronouns in terms of its gender. It's the way the language is functioning. So for right now, don't worry about all those things. Just know that there's 3 genders, and it's masculine, feminine, and neuter, and you got to know which noun is which gender by the vocabulary listing, the article that comes with it, that appears in the vocabulary listing is going to be there with it, and you're going to know which one it is. Now, when we think about vocabulary, the one thing we have is I have the Quizlet app that I've set up these vocabulary cards for you, and I'm hoping that you downloaded that. You get, if you're working through Greek grammar, that you click the link and join the class so you get access to all the flashcards. You can do different things with this. You can test yourself. You can set up flashcards in different ways. You can create matching games for yourself. Any way to use this tool, it's all free. So as you see here, I put in the noun with the article. And so I have all these listed here. Anthropos, ha. And so I have the different ones. And so if you flip them around, a brother. And then a man is ha anthropos. So you can kind of work backwards. An apostle is ha apostolos. And then a slave, a servant, ha doulos. A gift, ta doron. Or I'm sorry, hit the wrong button. Ta doron. And then a death, ha thanatos. A temple, ha hieron. Ta hieron. That's neuter. And there's that conjunction, and we'll need that. We'll talk about that later. That's so that you can do some of the exercises. You just need to know that conjunction. Kai. A word, a logos. And then a law, hanamas, a house, ha oikos, a son, ha weos. So like if you use this Quizlet program, again, it's free. You can join it. Then you get access to all the vocabularies. As I create them, they're available. There'll be all the vocabularies and the entire grammar will eventually be in here, and but you'll get access to it, and then you can do lesson by lesson by lesson, and work through all of that. And so just know that this is how you work this. Now there are two numbers. There are two numbers, singular and plural. Singular and plural. This is going to be important. They can be singular or they can appear as plural. One, more than one, two or more. Verbs agree with their subject in terms of number. So if the verb is in the plural form, the noun has to be, that goes with it as subject, has to be in the plural. See what I'm saying? If the verb is singular, then the noun has to be singular. So it's either like a son gives. There has to be subject-verb agreement in terms of number. So when you see this in Greek, we're going to look at this in Greek as we look at the exercises in one of our videos. You'll see what I'm talking about here. So they have two numbers, singular and plural, which that's what nouns have. I mean, if you go back to this basic article that I was giving you, it talks about how they're singular and how they're plural. And so singular and plural nouns. So an example, cat is singular, cats is plural. These two cats are both black. You have tax or taxes, house or houses. And so you realize that nouns have singular and plural. And they look differently if they're singular, and they look differently if they're plural. And we're going to see that in just a second. Now, there are also 5 cases. Remember it said that they have gender, number, and case. Cases is nominative, genitive, dative, accusative, and vocative. You say, what are the cases all about? What does that mean? We're going to look at that in just a minute. But just give you a highlight. Remember I talked about here in this article how nouns can have different functions. It was stated up here. They can have different roles. They could be the subject or the direct object or the indirect object. Remember that? That's what case functionality represents. We're going to talk about that in just a minute. What is the nominative? What is the genitive, the dative, the accusative, and the vocative? These are the 5 different cases that you have to learn. So before I explain to you what the nominative functions, how it functions in a sentence, how the genitive functions, how the dative functions, the accusative and the vocative, let me show you what it looks like first. So the author here is picking up on the word anthropos, ha anthropos, meaning a man. This is the general word. It could be a man, a physical man, or it could be mankind, like in men and women together. Humanity is how this word can be used. Greek has a specific word for a male and a female, and this is not that word. It's 2 different words, 2 other words. But just for the sake of the purpose here, we're going to translate this as a man, or for the sake of it. But I want you to see what's going on here. Remember in verbs we had the stem of the verb and then the ending. The stem always stayed the same, but the ending was different. Similar with nouns. you have a stem and then the ending. Notice that the vocabulary word, the word in the vocabulary, see, it always, if it's ha, it always has omicron sigma, omicron sigma, omicron sigma, omicron sigma. See that? Now, if it's neuter, it has a different omicron nu and omicron nu. But all the words here that have the masculine gender have this omicron sigma in its base form, in its vocabulary form, or what we call the lexical form. The lexical form of the word is the nominative singular form of the word. So, anthropo, let's see if I hit the wrong button there. Alpha, nu, theta, rho, omega, pi. Those words right there represent, those letters, sorry, represent the stem of the word. Notice, in every format here, this is nominative, singular, genitive, singular, dative, singular, accusative, singular, vocative, singular. What you have here is always the alpha, nu, theta, rho, omega, pi. You always have that stem. What changes is the endings. So the ending is omicron sigma for the nominative singular. It's omicron upsilon, which is a diphthong, for the genitive singular. It's an omega with an iota subscript here, data singular. It is omicron nu for the accusative singular. It is epsilon by itself for the vocative. Then you have the nominative and the vocative are the same. They look the same in the plural, and it's omicron iota. For the genitive plural, it's omega nu. For dative plural, it's omega iota sigma. For the accusative plural, it's omicron upsilon final sigma. So like you did with the verbs, you learn the stem and the ending. Greek is what we call a case-based language. It has endings to it in all of its cases in terms of its nouns. And so you want to be aware of this. You want to be aware of this paradigm. You need to memorize this paradigm. The student should observe carefully how the principles of accent apply to this noun and all the others. That's why we went through chapter 2, learned all the accents. In oral practice and recitations, the stress and pronunciation should be placed carefully on the syllables where the accent appears. So that way you pronounce it as, you try to at least adopt a methodology, right? We talked about that in accents. But the point I want to make here is the way you learn this is you need to learn this chart in the way that it appears here. You want to reproduce this chart for yourself. You want to take a blank sheet of paper. We're spending 30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour a day working on Greek, 5 days a week, This is something you want to be doing when you're in lesson 4. Just writing that chart out. Use the word anthropos. Maybe even try some of the other words in the vocabulary. Again, you take off the omicron sigma in the lexical form, the vocabulary form. This is the vocabulary form. You take off the omicron sigma and you got the rest of it. Then you can build the rest of it around it. Because once you know what the stem is, you can put the stem down on each one of those, write them down on your paper, and then you can put in the endings, and that way you'll know what the endings are. You can memorize them. And you want to say to yourself, okay, the nominative singular is os. The ending is os. Genitive singular is oo, oo. Dative singular is o with that iota subscript. Remember, the iota subscript is voiceless. It doesn't actually, you don't say anything with it. You're just really pronouncing the omega, but you want to remember that it has that iota subscript on it. Accusative singular, omicron nu, vocative singular, epsilon. Nominative, vocative, plural, omicron iota. Genitive, plural, omega nu. Dative, plural, omicron iota sigma. Accusative, plural, omicron upsilon sigma. And so you want to be aware of this. You want to memorize this chart. So the stem of the noun is that part of the noun which remains constant when the various endings are added. The stem of anthropos is anthropo, and all other second declension nouns, like anthropos, have stems ending in omega. The second declension, therefore, is sometimes called the O declension. But this final final omicron of the stem becomes so much disguised when the ending is entered into combination with it that it's more convenient to really regard the stem as anthropa. That's the stem you want to think about. And then look at it as omicron sigma, omicron upsilon, etc. as the endings. It should at any rate be observed, however, that omicron, with the long of it, omega, is the characteristic vowel in the last syllable of the second declension nouns. You either see omicrons for the most part, or you see omegas. The only difference is this vocative here. That's the only thing that's different than that general rule. So you just want to be aware of what the stem is. Practicality, there's your stem. So you take off the omicron sigma. So if you go back up to the vocabulary, we have omicron sigma. So adelph is the stem. Take away the omicron sigma. Apostolos. Take away the omicron sigma. Apostol. Alpha, pi, omega, omicron sigma, tau, omicron, lambda. There's your stem. Doulos. Take away the omicron sigma, it's dual. Or dole. You take off the omicron nu for neuters. Omicron sigma for thana. Thanat. Take away the omicron sigma. So you get the idea. Is you take away that omicron sigma in the nominative singular form, which that's your vocabulary form, then you're going to have the stem, and then you can build the rest of it around it. That's how you can recreate the chart. Now, let's talk about these cases and what each case functions at. This is what it looks like in Greek, but it has a functionality to it. So, if we say it's the nominative case is the subject of the sentence. That's how the Greeks did it. So if the word shows up here, like anthropos in the nominative, that's functioning like a subject in a sentence, the subject of the sentence. So apostolos, genoske. So genoske is the verb. It's present active indicative. What is that? That one is third person singular. So it's he knows. But who's the he? Apostolos. And notice it's singular. This is singular. So an apostle knows is how we translate it. Because you don't say he knows, you actually know who the he is. It's actually an apostle. And the apostle is singular, so we put an apostle here. The object of a transitive verb is placed in the accusative case. It's placed in the accusative case. So thus we see the word blepo. So blepo is I see. But blepo logon, omicron nu. If I come up here, omicron nu is accusative singular. So it's I see a word. So depending on the case, depends on the how it looks, tells you what case it's in, and depending on the case, tells you how it's functioning in the sentence. we have what's called the genitive case. That expresses the idea of possession. Thus, we have logoi, which is plural, apostolon. Apostolon is genitive plural. So you would translate this by the idea of words, plural, of apostles. You could say it apostles' words with the apostrophe there. I like to do it like this just to keep it consistent, to show that this is the noun and it's plural. This shows the other noun. It relates to this noun. So this one's in the nominative. This one's in the genitive. So the genitive expresses possessive. So what you will find is you will find genitives showing up after other nouns. One noun showing up after another one. You remember the phrase, the Son of God? The word son is in the nominative. The word God, the noun for God, which we'll learn later, is in the genitive form. And it's translated Son of God. That's how it does it in Greek. Now, the genitive can have many other important uses. And we'll learn those as we go. One of the uses of the genitive is possession. Possession. So you must learn these different uses by observation. He talks about Latin here. Latin has what's called an ablative case. And in Greek, it functions between the genitive and the dative. Don't worry about that statement. Machen knew Latin as well. He taught Latin, and as far as I could tell. And so I'm not teaching you Latin. I'm just teaching you Greek. So don't worry about that. But the genitive has different functions to it. This is the one that's more popular. We're going to start with that one. There will be others, and we'll see that as we go. The dative case is the case of what we call the indirect object. And see, remember that when I talked to you about in this article, it says, see if I can blow this up just a little bit for you here. It says nouns can play the role of subject, direct object, indirect object. They can function in different ways. That's what we're learning about. The way the Greeks differentiated between how a word is used or how a noun functions in a sentence is by giving it different letters, because those different letters represented a different function of that noun in that sentence. Not all nouns are subjects. Some function as possessive. They describe another noun. Some show direct object. Some show subject. Some show indirect object. So there's different forms of the nouns because there's different functions of those nouns within the sentences. So the dative case is the case of what we call the indirect object. Thus, if we have this little sentence here, lego, logon, apostolos, means I say, that's present active indicative, first singular. I say, this is logon, so that's accusative. This is ois, which is dative plural. So we come back up to the chart and we see that on is accusative singular. Ois is the ending for dative plural. So if we look at this, it's I say, lego, a word, logon, to the apostles. Or to apostles. No article there. But as with the genitive, the dative has many other important uses, which we must learn by observation as we move forward. For right now, we're giving you some of the basic functionality of the dative case, and that's the indirect object in a sentence. It's not its only functionality, as we will observe as we move forward. So what I want you to understand is that the different cases represent different functions in the sentence. We also have the vocative case. The vocative case is the case of direct address. The case of direct address. So like you could say, Adolphe, blebamen means brother, we see. So you could see this showing up in a narrative passage per se, where the person is addressing another person by name or by identification. So the vocative, You see it periodically, but it's the case of what we call direct address. In the plural, the vocative case in words of all declensions is formed like the nominative. So the vocative plural may therefore be omitted in repeating the paradigm. That's why it says here nominative vocative, because it looked the same. If we put V down here, our vocative, and had the word show up here, it would look exactly the same. So that's why the nominative and vocative are together in terms of its form. So again, you got to learn the forms, but notice this chart. A man, genitive of a man, that of kind of communicates the translation behind the idea of a possessive. The to or for a man is the idea of the dative, indirect object. A man could be the direct object, and then just man, like you're directly addressing. So to or for men, there's the plural of men. So you see that these translations are basic to the construction of the paradigm, or of the conjugational chart here, or declension chart, that you need to remember. So the main thing right now is that these different cases have different functionalities. So learn the declension of logos, ha, which is a word, and of doulos, ha, a servant. In paragraph 557, these nouns differ from anthropos only in that the accent is different in the nominative singular. Therefore, the application of the general rules of accent work out differently. This goes back to accent. You can work with that. It doesn't affect much of what I've been trying to communicate to you. So when you look at the declension of hawios, it's a masculine noun. It's we, os, u, o, on, a. Same endings, oi, on, ois, us. The reason he separates this and gives us this separate declension is because it's a two-syllable word, and so he wants to show you how the accents are different. That's why he talks about this here. Here, the rule of noun accent decrees that the accent must be on the ultima in all cases, because it was there in the nominative singular. But which accent shall it be? The general rules of accent answer this question, where the ultima is short, for of course only an acute, not a circumflex, can stand on a short syllable. But if the ultima is long, the general rules of accent will permit either an acute or a circumflex. So a special rule is therefore necessary, as follows. In the second declension, when the ultima is accented at all, it has the circumflex in the genitive and dative of both numbers, elsewhere the acute. So the elsewhere really refers only to the accusative plural, because in the nominative and the vocative singular and plural, and in the accusative singular, the general rules of accent would forbid the circumflex, the ultimate being short in these cases. So this goes back to the rules of accents. You can look through it, but the main point here is that when you look at the declension, the paradigm, that would be a son, of a son, to or for a son as a direct object. This is son as a subject of the sentence. This is son, like direct address. This would be sons, of sons, two or four sons, and then sons as direct object. This is, again, the subject of the sentence. So they give us this paradigm because of the difference in accents, which he tries to explain here in paragraph 40. For right now, don't worry about it. I wouldn't be that concerned with it. And so, let me see, we got a few other things. So let me do this. I'm going to continue. I'm going to cover these other final things and show you. Then the next video, we'll work through some exercises. We'll work through some of the sentences. I'll kind of walk you through some of this. So if I get through this, then I only have to make 2 videos, not a third video. So let me walk through this. Now, we looked at the declension chart for nouns, for masculine nouns, right? Remember in our vocabulary, we had 2 neuter nouns, 2 neuter nouns. And so I have to show you the chart for that because it's different. The declension of, this is still a second declension noun, but it's got neuter article instead of a masculine article. So you translate this word by a gift. But notice the paradigm is different. You still have the stem, but notice that the masculine nominative, or the neuter nominative singular, the nominative singular form is not omicron sigma, it's omicron nu. It's that way because it's a neuter noun designated by that article. So the paradigm is different. So this is a separate paradigm. So do-ron is the nominative and the vocative singular. They appear to be, they're in the same form. So omicron nu is the omicron nu is the nominative singular form and the vocative singular form. The genitive of a gift, we translate of a gift, is omicron upsilon, which is the same as the masculine. Great. The omega for dative with an iota subscript, same. Great. But even the accusative is omicron nu. So that's the same. Look at the genitive plural, same as the paradigm above. Ois is the same. The difference is the nominative and vocative is do-ra, not do-roi. It's not omicron iota. It's do-ra. And the accusative is the same form. So these are the same, these five, but that's different, and that's different. So you want to recognize that. It's going to be functioning in the same way. Nominatives, genitive, dative, accusative, vocative. It's still functioning in the sentence in whatever case it's in, but the case looks different in terms of the letters used to identify that case. You say, why did they do that? Why can't they keep it all the same? Make it simple. That's how their language works. There are things that we do in our language, rules that we have in our language that other people cannot understand. Remember, it was the Lord who divided the people according to language. And so, again, we're learning a language that developed, that was spoken, and it had certain rules to it. It had certain elements to it that we can't even understand why it's that way. We're probably never going to figure that out. The point is, we're trying to learn enough so that we can translate the Greek New Testament, because that's the language that the New Testament was originally written in. That's when Matthew wrote his gospel, and Mark wrote his gospel, and Luke wrote his gospel, and the book of Acts. Paul wrote all those letters. John wrote his gospel, the epistles, and the book of Revelation. And you have the authors of Hebrews, you have James, you have Peter, you have all these people who wrote these letters. They wrote it in the grammar or the Greek language, using the grammar of what the time period was that was the common language of the day. And this is what it looked like. So we may not understand why they do it this way and why they do it that way, but we just have to be aware of it. So you need to learn this paradigm as well. It will be observed that do-ron is a neuter noun. In all neuter nouns of all declensions, the vocative and the accusative of both numbers are like the nominative, and the nominative, vocative, and accusative plurals always end in a short alpha. So no matter what the declension is. So we'll see that as we go forward. For right now, we're just focusing on this. Okay? Another thing you need to know about is the order of words. The normal order of a sentence in Greek is like that in English. The subject comes first, then the verb, then the object. That is the normal tendency. There's no special tendency like in Latin to put the verb at the end of the sentence, which that's a unique trait of Latin grammar, not of Greek grammar. But Greek can vary the order for purposes of emphasis, or what's called euphony, which is the pronunciation of words, maybe to make parallelisms, much more freely than English does. So, thus the sentence, an apostle says a word, in Greek normally would be apostolos, lege, logon. An apostle says a word. This is nominative singular. This is accusative singular. This is the subject of the sentence. this is the direct object of the sentence. But lege apostolos logon and logon lege apostolos are both perfectly possible. Why? Because it's not about order, it's about endings. When you see the endings, if I see this, I know that's a verb. If I see this, I know that that's all nominative singular. So I know that it comes in my translation before the verb, even though in Greek it appears after. And I know that's the accusative because of the form of the word, how the word looks. So just know that Greek can change word order because word order is not as important like it is in English. Word order is, even though there's a tendency to have a same kind of word order, put the subject first, then the verb, then the direct object, it could be out of order because it's all based on endings. And if it is out of order, if it is like this or like that, it's because they're wanting to emphasize the verb over the subject. So the English translation must be determined by observing the endings. Not by observing the order, by observing the endings of the words. That's why it's important you learn these paradigms. These paradigms. That's why you learn them, you memorize them, okay? And you know the gender of the word by looking at the article. So you got to learn these things. One other thing before we look at the exercises in our next video, we're going to just look at exercises. So here we have what's called the movable nu. When the usi of the third person plural of the verb, remember that, comes either before a vowel or at the end of a sentence, a nu called movable nu is added to it. Thus, okay, blepusin. Well, I know that usi right there, that's third person plural. Where's that nu coming from? The reason you see that nu and the reason that this is given to us in this chapter is because now, what if you have a direct object after it in the accusative case? And the word that comes after it has a vowel right there. What they did was to say the word better, because they had to say this in a sentence. Instead of saying blepusi apostolus, they said blepusin apostolus. That's how they pronounced it. You say, well, it doesn't make a difference to me. No, it doesn't. You could probably say it either way and it'd be fine. But in Greek, the Greeks who lived during that period of time, it didn't make sense to them. It made better sense to say blepusin apostolus. That's just how they did it. We do these things in our languages. Little things like that for pronunciation's sake. Just so you know, if you see that movable nu, it shows up if you have the next word that comes after it begins with a vowel. Sometimes the movable nu is added even before a word that begins with a consonant. Sometimes you could have it Lucy Dulus or Lucine Dulus. Either way is correct. Just be aware that in that that movable nu can show up. It must not be supposed that this movable nu occurs at the end of every verb form ending in a vowel when the next word begins with a vowel. On the contrary, it occurs only in very few forms, which must be learned as they appear. So we're trying to make you aware of this. That's the main thing. So it doesn't throw you off. So you begin to see this, okay? And just go with it. Embrace the weirdness of that, because you don't want to get hung up on this. So again, my recommendation is that you continue to read through this lesson. There's going to be another video. I'm going to give you some examples. We're going to work through some of these exercises. I'm going to translate some of these for you. I would recommend that in your time of working through Greek grammar, you want to work through these exercises, even go backwards, take the English and try to put it back into Greek. If the more you do of these, you will test yourself on, can you write the vocabulary? Can you spell it correctly? Can you put the proper ending on it? How does that work? And so you want to be aware of that. And in the video YouTube description below, I'm going to put, like I said, I'm going to put the link to this article. I'm going to put the link to the verb article back in lesson 3 videos. Um, and then I'm also going to put the link to the Quizlet. That'll be there, so you can use that. I'll also put there's quizzes and a worksheet that I've created. Um, 2 quizzes, 1 worksheet. The quizzes are designed for you to do those and attempt to do those without looking at the textbook. So after you've worked through these lessons and done some of the exercises, go back and you can download the quizzes. You can download the quizzes and be able to work through them, writing them out at your own level. Trying not to look at the textbook, and then I'm also going to have answer keys for the quizzes. I'm going to have answer keys for the worksheet. So all those links will be there and be available to you for the different documents that I produce. So those are all in the YouTube description for both videos. So again, work through the process at your own pace as you can, and continue to learn. You're only going to learn this by working with it, by translating. You got to get in here and begin to translate sentences. You got to be able to translate these things, these sentences, and think through it and think through how to do this. And again, the next video, I'm going to give you some practical help, show you how to work through translation, how to objectively go through it and work through the process. Okay? So let me pray for us, and then you can go to the next video where we'll talk about exercises. Okay? Dear Lord, we just thank you for this opportunity to be able to learn Greek and work through the grammar. Lord, we know that these things can be difficult, but Lord, the more that we expose our mind to it and work through it, the more we spend time thinking through it and working through the translations and thinking through the paradigms, the more we become comfortable and more familiar with the language. And we have more of a command of understanding it, so that eventually we can read it in the Greek New Testament and understand what the authors were writing, the fullness of what the authors were writing. And so, Lord, I just pray your blessing be upon us in this endeavor. And Lord, for those who are participating in this, Lord, I just pray your blessing be upon them. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. So, be working through the grammar and learning the vocabulary. And again, there'll be a second video, and that will give you a way to work through these sentences. We're just going to start, and I'm going to try to translate as many of these as I can in the time that I have to kind of give you an idea of how to think through it and approach translation of the Greek New Testament, or Greek grammar, say it that way. Okay, take care. God's blessings. We'll see you in the next video.